investigative journalist who could probably tell everybody right now, I told you so. A number of the reports are coming out now that are confirming what Peter has written about, researched thoroughly, and he's going to share that. His article is on the table over here, Going Postal. Marga will show that in the book. Going Postal is here. The paper copy is available for free, and the book is $10, and it's worth the money. This will give you all the facts that you need to prove the case that the Postal Service is getting sold out by corporate, greedy people who want to grab these buildings for cheap, with the help of Senator Feinstein and her husband, who has an exclusive contract to sell buildings nationwide. Unheard of. Unheard of. So there's a call for investigation. Peter's the one who kind of launched it off with a lot of his work, and he's going to come up and share it with us, and we really thank him. I heard you on KPFA the other day, and people heard the interview that you had. So we really thank Peter for being here today. Peter Byrne, to the mic. Thank you, Peter, for being here and all your good work.
Well, thanks. You kind of summed up the whole thing, so I don't really have to say anything. Just kidding. Actually, I'm live streaming the whole thing on Periscope, so we have an international audience today. The whole world is watching Berkeley once again. Could it be the epicenter of the revolution? I know you guys are ready for the long haul. I mean, we've all gotten gray together, right? So here we are. Let's overthrow the post office. No, I mean, let's save the post office. About a year and a half ago, as you all know, I wrote a piece for the East Bay Express based on my book, which came out at the same time, called Going Postal, How Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband is selling post offices to his friends cheap. And the investigation, basically using public records, was able to prove definitively that the sole source contract that Feinstein's husband, Richard Blum's company, CBRE, has to sell all of the postal real estate at will and manage their leasing for what amounts to an $85 billion real estate portfolio, was all sole sourced to his company, which is extremely unusual. They proceeded to sell incredibly valuable inner-city real estate parcels that had been owned by the post office to their business partners at vastly reduced prices, far, far, far under market value, indeed under assessed value, which is always far under market value. I was able to prove that by pulling the records at about 50 different county assessors' offices around the country electronically, which was cool because you couldn't have done that 5 years ago, and comparing them to the purchase prices, which were really low. And I was also able to show that in violation of the basic tenets of real estate law and common sense ethics, CBRE was representing both the buyer and the seller in these transactions, which was an incredible conflict of interest. There was some national media attention to the article, but it didn't exactly hit the front page of the New York Times, go figure. However, it did inspire the Inspector General of the Post Office, apparently, to mount a 17-month investigation, which was released in April. I wrote about that in the East Bay Express. And it was a remarkable investigation. Just to give you some slight background, the Inspector Generals are supposedly independent bodies in government agencies that have the power to audit their agencies. They also have the power to bring criminal charges and to do criminal investigations. Usually they just stick with the audits. They had done 3 audits of the CBR contract since it was promulgated in 2011, and they were very severely critical, saying that it had potential for conflicts of interest. I was able to show that they did indeed have conflicts of interest and that they were engaging in arguably illegal activities, and I presented in my book a blueprint for an indictment. When the Inspector General's report came out in April, he called for the immediate termination of the contract, which is also unheard of, and he assigned his criminal investigation division to look into the matter because he had determined that CBR realtors were essentially shaking down the owners of post offices that were leasing them to the Postal Service, telling them that they had to give them a commission when their contract didn't allow them to do such, and then negotiating exorbitantly high rents so that they could raise their 6% commission even higher. At the same time, the Inspector General, backtracking on my work, for which I received not a penny from the federal government, I must add, determined that he was, his company, CBRE, was selling post offices to his friends cheap. So, this is quite remarkable. This was in April, and knowing how things in the federal government work, it could be years before this gets anywhere. And being that the company under investigation is essentially owned by the family of the powerful U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's the chairperson of the Intelligence Committee, and has an inside track on everything from what the NSA does to Navy SEALs. Hopefully we won't see any Navy SEALs coming down on Berkeley and taking out the leaders of this fantastic post office, save the post office struggle, but keep your eyes peeled for Men in Black. And it's possible, although improbable, that indictments will eventually be laid against the perpetrators of this fraud against the American public. And I fervently pray that we're all still standing here and able to witness that, as opposed to having joined Mr. Franklin in his current abode. Thank you.
What's your full name? Okay.
Q&A?
Q&A.
Anybody have any
Questions
questions?
of Peter. This guy is a brain to pick, and he knows just about everything, having studied this closely. You had a question?
What started you on this?
What started you on this?
Gray Brecken. I had actually, in 2007, I did a big investigation that got tons of national attention, actually, about how when Dianne Feinstein was the chairperson of the military construction subcommittee of the Senate Appropriations Committee, she steered $1.5 billion worth of contracts to two companies that were owned by her family. And that infuriated mostly the right-wingers. People like Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly invited me on their shows, and I told them to go F themselves, and hang out with homophobic reactionary pigs. But, I did do the KPF circuit, KPFK circuit, as it were, Pacifica circuit, and other circuits. And it actually, the right-wingers just blogged the hell out of it, and it was quite interesting. And then when I was doing that, Gray had asked me to speak at the Graduate School of Journalism. He was teaching a seminar there on that process, and it was while the students here were rising up around tuition increases. And so on the campus that day, they were just, all this activity and civil disobedience. And Gray said, why don't you write about Mr. Blum? He's the head of the Board of Regents here. And I thought, well, okay. So I was able to show after a few months of investigation that Mr. Blum, who's an investment banker and a private equity specialist, a junk bond king, as it were, as the head of the investment committee of the Regents, had funneled well over $1 billion into the family businesses owned by he and his wife, because they, of course, being residents of California, have community property 50-50. She owns 50% of every dollar that he has earned since they got married 30 years ago. So I did that, and then I thought I was done with these people, because it really wasn't like I didn't want to be known for the rest of my career as the antagonist of the Blum-Feinstein axis, and left to hang out to dry by the mainstream media, which could really care less about it. And however, I got a call from Gray, and he had some nonprofit foundation money attached to his request to look into the post office deal. And I did. I worked on it on and off for a couple of years, actually, and thanks to Gray and other people on various foundations, I was able to put significant time into it, because it was really time-consuming. So I did that, and I don't really want to write any more about these folks, but I could be convinced to do so. And in my research, I did discover, just to give you a little taste of things that could be to come, Mr. Blum has created 7 or 8 nonprofits through his various companies. One of them is connected to the Blum Center for Developing Economies here at UCB, which is a place where students can go to learn how to exploit third world peoples and take their resources. And the income tax statement of that nonprofit that Blum set up doesn't say that it's an educational organization. It says that it's an organization that will specialize in buying and selling real estate. I thought that's really incredible. And then, supposedly Blum gave $15 million to the center to start it up. He may have, but it's also possible that it got funneled through some of these nonprofits that he's got that interlock with various University of California nonprofits, and that it really wasn't his money to start with, because he's clearly, cheap. I mean, it's not like he goes around giving away lots of money except to investigative reporting organizations like the Center for Investigative Reporting here in Berkeley, to which gets money from Blum and his partners, and thereby never, ever, ever goes anywhere near anything to do with what goes on with those guys. Not to mention, do they ever talk about California politicians? It's always about public servants and nurses and, occasionally some fracking, which is all well and good. But, these nonprofit investigative organizations that have been set up and funded by people like Blum, which is, the billionaires are funding a lot of these investigative things like, sorry to say, Glenn Greenwald's Intercept, financed by Mr. PayPal. They do some good work, but then look at what they don't do. And one of the things that they don't do is write about what's going on with the post office and with the intersection of this one political family's financial interests with the public treasury. Before I conclude, I just would like to say that there is a context to this. It's not just a case of some bad actors. This is a system that is privatizing the world in the interest of the 1,000th of 1%. And what you see going on in Greece is just, very similar to what's going on here, but with an American character. Every place the IMF and the World Bank and the banking system goes, they have a certain kind of national flavor that they put onto the thieving process in which they engage. And the post office is at the forefront of this because it has $85 billion worth of real estate they all want. Plus, it's got the biggest union with the most African Americans in it in the United States, and they'd like to crush that. So the next time that some poor non-unionized slob comes to your house with your Amazon book package on a Sunday, you might want to send it back, unless, of course, it's my book, which is also on Amazon. Any more questions? Yes.
Are you saying that the Sunday deliveries are being done by private people and not postal employees?
She's asking a question about Sunday deliveries or weekend deliveries.
They're being done by post office employees that are not unionized and are paid approximately half the wage that the unionized employees are getting. Some of the biggest contractors for the post office has already been privatized. Let's not kid ourselves, really. The only thing that the Postal Service people can do that private business can't do is actually put a letter into your mailbox. Everything else they can do. And they've pretty much outsourced everything but that. FedEx, UPS, various trucking companies. This one airline, Khalida Airlines, that gets like $500 million a year to deliver mail to soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq. How hard could that be, right? It's just a big feeding trough at the post office, and it's run by these people that the Inspector General has done some great reports on how these people use their credit cards. They pay their home at the Postal Service headquarters in Washington. High-ranking executives have been caught paying their home mortgages with their government credit cards, going to porn sites and gambling, buying computers, taking European vacations for their entire families. Nobody's gone to jail for it. I was able to show that Mr. Samra, who engineered all this post office stuff and is the head of the Postal Service Real Estate Division, frequently flies first class to Switzerland for like the day, right? Why does anybody go to Switzerland for that day, right? And then turn around and come back first class. He's worth, actually, according to his financial disclosure statements, as much as $98 million, and he lives in a modest home in Vienna, Virginia. Go figure. Incidentally, he was in charge of real estate for the Red Cross, which ProPublica has just revealed got $500 million from people that were supposed to help build housing in Haiti after the earthquake, and they built 6 houses, and they can't find the rest of the money. Guess who was in charge of real estate at the Red Cross right prior to that? Actually, we set up the whole system. It was Mr. Samra. So real estate, is where the money is. And the Postal Service Postmaster General when I called for a comment about